Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds, taking a close look at the architecture of organizational leadership.
Yeah, we're synthesizing some pretty dense stuff. Doctrine and strategy frameworks, real-world case studies. It's about understanding that big leap leaders take.
Exactly. Moving beyond that direct face-to-face command we're all familiar with, into leading large, complex organizations, thousands of people, major institutional outcomes. It's a different game.
It really is. And
Yeah.
frankly, it's often the toughest transition in a leader's career. So our sources today are meant to bridge that gap, between the theory in the books and the messy reality on the ground.
Okay, so what's in our stack for today?
All right, we're starting with the foundation. Army Doctrine Publication 622, Army Leadership and the Profession. We're focusing specifically on the parts dealing with the Army profession, ethics, and, crucially, organizational leadership concepts.
But we're not just leaving the doctrine hanging there, are we?
No, absolutely not. We're immediately putting it into context with a really practical strategic framework called the vision process. 7 steps to a better organization. Think of it as a how-to for change.
And then the reality check.
The Aviano case study. This is where we see a highly successful tactical leader thrown into an organizational nightmare. It really tests the doctrine.
And finally, how do leaders actually develop the thinking skills for all this?
For that, we're pulling from challenging student thinking through case method teaching. It gets into how leaders learn to navigate that kind of uncertainty and complexity.
So the mission today is basically to pull out the core professional expectations for leaders making that jump from direct to organizational command, connecting the doctrinal what with the real-world how.
That's the goal, making it tangible.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, though, with Army Doctrine Publication 622. The foundation, the Army profession itself. What's the core idea there? Why is it so important?
Well, the doctrine lays it out very clearly. The Army isn't just a government department. It's got this dual nature. It is a military department, yes, serving under civilian authority, but it's also defined as a trusted military profession.
And that word trusted seems absolutely central.
It's everything, because the American people grant the Army this trust, this confidence, and it's that trust that gives the profession the autonomy it needs to exercise disciplined initiative, which is vital for actually getting the mission done around the world.
So the identity isn't just internal, it's based on that relationship with the nation.
Precisely. And the core expertise that defines this profession, it's the ethical design, generation, support, and application of land power, always under civilian authority. If that public trust breaks down, the autonomy, the freedom to act decisively, well, that starts to erode too.
That makes sense. Trust is the bedrock. It dictates behavior.
It absolutely does. And this moral contract, if you will, is formalized in what the doctrine calls the Army ethic.
Okay, what does that encompass?
It's the set of enduring moral principles, values, beliefs, and laws that guide the entire profession. And the whole point of adhering to this ethic is to build and maintain what the document calls the culture of trust.
Trust up, down, and sideways.
Exactly. Trust between leaders and led, trust among peers, trust between soldiers, trust with Army civilians, and fundamentally, trust with the American people and our allies. It's all interconnected.
And the responsibility for upholding this falls squarely on leaders.
Without a doubt, Army professionals are expected, really required, to demonstrate 3 key characteristics: character, competence, and commitment. These are the entry requirements, essentially, and you have to keep demonstrating them.
Character, competence, commitment. The 3 C's.
Right. And that commitment piece often involves significant personal sacrifice.
Huh.
There's a powerful quote in the doctrine from General of the Army Douglas MacArthur.
What does he say?
He says, "The soldier, above all other people, prays for peace, for he must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars of war." It really speaks to the solemn obligation involved.
That sets an incredibly high bar for leadership.
It does. It demands the highest ethical and moral standards.
Okay, so moving from the character of the professional to the act of leading itself, how does Army Doctrine Publication 622 define leadership?
Leadership is defined pretty succinctly as the activity of influencing people. But it qualifies that influence significantly.
How so?
It's influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation. And the goal is twofold: accomplish the mission and improve the organization. It's not just about the task at hand.
And who is considered a leader in this model?
This is interesting. The doctrine says an Army leader is anyone who, by virtue of an assumed role or assigned responsibility, inspires and influences people. So it's broader than just rank or position. It's about impact.
Let's break down those 3 key actions. Purpose, direction, motivation. They seem critical regardless of your level. How does a leader provide purpose effectively?
Purpose is the why. Leaders absolutely have to articulate why something needs to be done. Even if it's a difficult task or seems mundane, they need to connect it to a higher purpose, something bigger than self-interest, so people see how their piece fits into the larger strategy.
So it's about context and meaning.
Exactly. If that why is clear, then subordinates are empowered. They can use their judgment, exercise initiative, adapt when things change, even without direct supervision. It unlocks potential.
Okay, then direction. This sounds more straightforward, but maybe it isn't, especially at higher levels.
It's straightforward in concept, less so in practice, especially as you move up. Direction means communicating the desired end state, setting priorities, assigning responsibility. But, and this is key, particularly for organizational leaders, it's about providing clear boundaries without micromanaging.
Ah, so setting the conditions for initiative, not just compliance.
Precisely. You give clear intent, the left and right limits the objective, but you allow subordinates the freedom to figure out the best way to get there within that framework. Clear direction actually enables adaptation.
And the third pillar, motivation. This feels like the most human element.
It absolutely is, and it's nuanced. The doctrine points out that indirect approaches to motivation are often just as, if not more, effective than direct commands or incentives.
Like what kind of indirect approaches?
Well, the classic example is leading by example, sharing hardship, sharing risk alongside your people. That builds incredible trust and confidence in the leader's judgment and commitment. It's about that shared experience.
That goes back to building that culture of trust we talked about.
It does. And conversely, the doctrine warns leaders to be really careful about relying on negative motivators.
Like pressure or punishment.
Yes. Using threats or excessive pressure might get short-term compliance, sure, but the text warns it breeds resentment, kills initiative, and ultimately leads to low morale and erodes trust. Real commitment comes from shared purpose and trust, not fear.
Okay, so the doctrine provides a structure for understanding what leaders need to be and do. This is the Army Leader Requirements Model. Let's start with the attributes. First up is presence.
Presence is essentially how others perceive a leader. It's that outward projection. It includes things like military and professional bearing, projecting confidence, composure, looking the part, basically.
And fitness is part of that, too.
A big part. But it's holistic fitness. Physical, mental, emotional. A fit leader can handle stress better, make better decisions under pressure, and importantly, they model the standard for everyone else. The doctrine calls fitness a cornerstone of combat readiness.
There's a really striking story in the doctrine that illustrates presence under fire.
Oh yeah, the platoon leader in Iraq. It's a great example. His vehicle gets hit by gunfire from insurgents on a scooter. He gets back in, sees his driver is completely frozen, understandably terrified.
What does he do?
He just calmly says, "Those guys can't shoot." Just that simple statement, delivered with composure in the middle of chaos. That's presence. It reassures, it stops panic from spreading, it allows the team to keep functioning. It's resilience in action.
Wow. Okay, so presence is the outward projection. The next attribute category is intellect. This is the internal horsepower, right?
Exactly. Brain power and knowledge. It covers several things. Mental agility is key, that flexibility of mind to think critically, adapt to unexpected situations, see things from multiple angles, anticipate changes.
Essential in complex environments.
Absolutely. Then there's sound judgment. The ability to assess situations accurately, often with incomplete information, and make sensible decisions in a timely way.
And judgment often comes the hard way. There's that Omar Bradley quote.
Right, General Bradley. Judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. It acknowledges that learning from mistakes is part of the process. You don't achieve good judgment by avoiding tough decisions.
So, mental agility, sound judgment. What else falls under intellect?
Innovation. The ability to introduce new ideas, new ways of doing things. This requires creative thinking, but also being willing to listen to and implement ideas from subordinates who might have a better view from the ground.
And finally, expertise.
Yes, deep knowledge. This includes tactical and technical know-how, of course. But as you move up, joint, interagency, intergovernmental, and multinational knowledge becomes crucial. Understanding how other services, agencies, and nations operate, and cultural and geopolitical expertise becomes paramount too.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for the next big idea, the transition in leadership levels, moving from that direct, hands-on role to leading large organizations.
This is where the continuum of leadership levels comes in, also from Army Doctrine Publication 622. It lays out three broad levels: direct, organizational, and strategic.
Direct is what most people start with.
Right. Face-to-face, first-line leaders,
Hmm.
leading small teams, focusing on individual training, task execution. It's immediate, tangible.
But then you hit organizational leadership, and things change fundamentally.
Dramatically, now you're guiding multiple units, maybe influencing thousands of people. The key difference is the distance between your actions and their effects. A policy change you make might not ripple through the organization for weeks or months.
So you can't rely on seeing the immediate results of your orders.
Exactly. Which means you have to rely much more on indirect influence. You lead through your subordinate leaders, through staff, through systems, through policy. You spend a lot more time planning, coordinating, thinking, reflecting, trying to anticipate those second and third order effects.
And then strategic leadership takes that even further out.
Way further. We're talking major command level,
Yeah.
Department of the Army, Department of Defense. The scope is immense. The timelines stretch into years, even decades. Strategic leaders are dealing with national security policy, resource allocation on a massive scale, shaping the entire future direction and culture of the force. Complexity is the defining characteristic.
Let's focus back on that organizational leader level. Since they're leading indirectly, what specific competencies become absolutely critical?
Well, the way they lead others has to adapt. Influence is indirect. They need to set clear intent, achievable standards, but then empower subordinates. A huge piece here is integrating and synchronizing all the different elements under them, including those unified action partners.
Unified action partners meaning allies, other services, government agencies.
Exactly. People who don't necessarily work directly for you. Getting them all moving in the same direction is a core organizational task.
They also still need to lead by example, but presumably that looks different too.
It does. It's less about being at the front physically and more about positioning yourself strategically. Being present where key decisions are made, where you can assess the situation, apply that quick creative thinking. Proximity, even if it's through virtual means or visiting key nodes, helps shorten reaction time and allows for necessary adjustments. It's about demonstrating strategic engagement.
And the third key competency you mentioned extends influence beyond the chain of command. This sounds like a major challenge.
Oh, it is often the most difficult adjustment. You're dealing with peers, allies, interagency partners who have different priorities, different constraints, maybe even different cultures. You can't just issue orders.
So what do you rely on?
Persuasion, negotiation, building consensus, finding common ground. Success hinges heavily on your informal authority, the respect and trust you earn through your demonstrated competence, your character, your ability to build relationships. Rank alone often isn't enough.
There's an incredible historical example in the doctrine about this Task Force Kingston in Korea.
It's a fantastic illustration. You have this second lieutenant, Robert Kingston, who ends up effectively commanding a mixed task force during intense fighting in late 1950. This force grows rapidly and includes units, officers, even a captain who technically outrank him.
And it worked. How?
It worked because everyone on the ground recognized that Lieutenant Kingston, despite his rank, was the most competent leader there. He was making the right calls in an incredibly chaotic, high-stakes situation. His competence became his authority. People followed him because he knew what he was doing.
It really underscores why those intellect attributes, judgment, expertise are so critical at the organizational level. It's not just academic.
Not at all. It's the foundation of your credibility when you need to influence people outside your direct control.
Okay, one more key competency for organizational leaders. Creates a positive environment. How do they do that when they're so removed from the day-to-day?
Primarily through policies, programs, and resource allocation. They set the tone from the top, but because they can't see everything directly, they have to rely on assessment tools like climate surveys and actively listen to their specialized staff.
Like chaplains, legal advisors, equal opportunity advisors.
Exactly. These people have their finger on the pulse of the organization's climate. The leader needs that feedback to understand the ethical health, the morale, the trust levels within the force. Ultimately, though, the responsibility for maintaining an ethical, professional, positive climate rests firmly with that organizational leader.
All right, this is a perfect pivot point. We've laid out the doctrine, the attributes, the competencies, the shift to organizational leadership. Now let's see how it all holds up under extreme pressure with the Aviano case study.
Yeah, Aviano is a crucible. It takes all these concepts and throws them into a real-world high-stakes scenario. We meet Colonel Handletooth, call sign Fang. Successful F-15 pilot, known for being aggressive, tenacious.
A tactical ace.
Right. And now he's taking command of the 31st Fighter Wing at Aviano Air Base in Italy, right in the middle of major Balkan operations. It's a huge organizational level command.
And he inherits a base in crisis, doesn't he?
Big time. Aviano basically exploded overnight. It went from a tiny support base, maybe 1,500 people, no permanently assigned aircraft, to the main hub for Operation Deny Flight. We're talking over 5,000 personnel, 136 aircraft by 1993.
On a base designed for, what, 45 planes?
Like something like that. The infrastructure just couldn't cope. You had massive shortages of everything: housing, school capacity, basic services like the commissary, the base exchange. They were completely overwhelmed. A classic organizational problem impacting the welfare of followers' mandate.
And the physical layout didn't help.
No, the base was fragmented, spread across 6 different areas around the town. Made command and control and just building cohesion incredibly difficult.
On top of the internal chaos, he's got major external pressures, too. The dual-hatting issue.
Right. Colonel Tooth isn't just the U.S. wing commander, he's also the NATO provisional wing commander. So he has operational control over U.S. forces, but only coordinating control over multinational forces. He's constantly having to extend influence beyond the chain of command.
And reporting to a very senior, very demanding Navy admiral.
Yeah, Admiral Leighton Smith, a 4-star commander of all Allied forces Southern Europe. The case mentions Admiral Smith expects quick, detailed answers, especially about joint capabilities. This screams the need for that joint expertise we talk about under the intellect attribute. Tooth has to navigate Navy expectations, NATO expectations.
While also dealing with what his vice commander called the crusher calendar of VIP visits.
Oh man, yeah. Presidents, secretaries of defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, even celebrities. Constant high-level visits. They drain enormous amounts of time and resources, pulling the commander and his staff away from focusing on the mission and fixing those deep infrastructure problems.
Like the Aviano 2000 plan to upgrade the base.
Exactly. He's trying to implement this long-term fix, but the day-to-day operational tempo and the VIP demands mean he lacks the time to do that deep thinking, planning, and coordinating that organizational leadership requires. He's constantly reacting.
And all this pressure, operational tempo, poor living conditions, constant scrutiny, it inevitably leads to internal strain, right?
Absolutely. The case highlights clear signs. The relentless 6-day combat mission cycle was grinding people down. Colonel Blues, the vice commander, noted increases in alcohol offenses, infidelity, families requesting early return. The human cost was becoming visible. It's that tension between mission accomplishment and welfare of followers playing out.
And then there was the toxic rivalry between the two F-16 squadrons, the 555th Triple Nickel and the 510th Buzzards.
Yeah, this is a classic example of how perceived unfairness can just poison the climate and destroy trust. The 510th have felt completely overshadowed, like unloved stepchildren, as the case puts it.
Why was that?
Well, the 555th arrived first, got the better facilities, then they got all the positive press, especially after the successful rescue of Captain O'Grady, even though 509th pilots were actually the ones who found him initially.
Ouch. That would sting.
Right. And then the commanding officer of the 555th gets promoted early. For the 510th commander, who already felt slighted, this just solidified his negative attitude, and that negativity spread through his squadron. It directly challenges the leader's responsibility to build trust across the organization.
So Aviano shows that at the organizational level, success isn't just about combat effectiveness. It's about managing systems, resources, external politics, internal climate, perception.
Precisely. It's the ultimate test of those organizational competencies. Colonel Tooth needed to extend influence to deal with Admiral Smith and NATO. He needed to create a positive environment by addressing that squadron rivalry and quality of life issues. His tactical skills weren't enough to solve these organizational problems.
Okay, so given that kind of complexity and chaos, what tools can a leader use? How do you drive change in such an environment? Let's look at the vision process.
Right. This framework by Bonnet and Walker offers a structured way to approach organizational change. It's not just about having a vague idea, it's a methodology. A good vision, they argue, has to define 3 things clearly.
What are they?
The what, the why, and the how. The what is a clear, compelling picture of the desired future state for the organization.
And they warn against the everyone is a winner trap here.
Exactly. Just saying we'll be the best is meaningless. Everyone thinks they're the best already. What needs to be specific, challenging, and focused externally. The example they use is great. An Army teaching department aiming to be the Army's premier organizational level leadership resource.
rather than just the best teaching department.
Right. The first one implies external impact, continuous improvement, a standard to strive for. The second is internal and kind of static.
Okay, so that's the what. What about the why?
The why connects the vision to the organization's core values and culture. It provides the deeper purpose. For that teaching department, the why was something like to instill a desire in others to be better leaders.
Yeah.
It taps into shared values of professional development, service, critical thinking. It links back to that Army ethic.
And the how is the strategy to get there.
Yes. But crucially, implementing the vision isn't just about laying out steps. It's fundamentally about problem solving. You start with an honest assessment. What are the real obstacles standing between us now and that future vision?
Like the infrastructure problems or the squadron conflict at Aviano.
Exactly. You identify those specific obstacles, then you set concrete goals aimed at overcoming them, and then you develop the how, the implementation strategy. And that strategy has to focus intensely on motivating people intrinsically.
And this loops right back to purpose, direction, motivation, but framed for organizational change.
Perfectly. The framework highlights driving intrinsic motivation through purpose. That's the why of the vision. Autonomy, empowering people, giving them control over their tasks, trusting them, like the doctrine says. And mastery, creating opportunities for people to get better at what they do and achieve tangible successes, those short-term wins.
So you could see applying this at Aviano. Give the 510th Squadron maybe autonomy over a key part of the Aviano 2000 plan. Let them achieve mastery, get a win, rebuild some trust.
That's exactly the kind of thinking the vision process encourages. It provides a structure for organizational leaders to systematically apply those core leadership principles, purpose, empowerment, development, to drive positive change and build a healthier climate.
This all requires some sophisticated thinking, though. Which brings us to the last piece. How do leaders develop these conceptual skills? The role of case studies.
Right. The article Challenging Student Thinking Through Case Method Teaching makes a strong argument for cases as essentially vicarious experiential learning.
Learning from others' experiences, basically.
Yeah. Real experience is the best teacher, sure, but it's often costly, time-consuming, and sometimes catastrophic. Learning deeply from a well-constructed case study lets you grapple with complex problems without paying the real-world price of failure. It's efficient development.
And cases mirror the messiness of reality better than a straightforward lesson.
That's the point. Good cases are packed with nuance, conflicting information, maybe irrelevant details, ambiguity, just like the real situations leaders face. Think about all the tangled issues Colonel Tooth was juggling at Aviano.
So the goal isn't to find the right answer.
No, not usually. The goal is to practice critical thinking. Sifting evidence, identifying assumptions you have to make, evaluating different courses of action, understanding trade-offs. It forces you to wrestle with the uncertainty, just like you have to in the job.
And the article stresses the importance of taking the protagonist role.
Yes. Approaching the case as if you are the decision maker facing the problem. Now what they call a prospective case. Looking forward, weighing options, considering consequences. That's far more developmental than just looking back and critiquing what someone else did, a retrospective case. You have to own the potential outcomes.
To help structure that analysis, they suggest framing the case. What does that involve?
It's a systematic way to break down the complexity. First, identify the key players. Who are they? What are their interests? What are their constraints? For Tooth, that's everyone from his pilots to Admiral Smith to the local Italian officials.
Okay, players and interests. What else?
Second, rigorously separate the known facts from the assumptions you're making because information is incomplete. Be explicit about what you don't know. Third, identify the relevant paradigms.
Paradigms meaning the underlying assumptions or conventional wisdom.
Exactly. The accepted ways of thinking, maybe rooted in doctrine or organizational culture or tradition. You need to understand those paradigms before you can effectively challenge them or leverage them for innovation.
So the case method really forces you to exercise those intellect attributes, mental agility, judgment, innovation.
It absolutely does. It puts you in the thick of the human drama, the organizational friction, the ethical dilemmas, and demands that you think your way through it. It's like a flight simulator for organizational leadership decisions. It's where judgment gets honed.
Okay, let's try to synthesize all this. We started with the bedrock, the Army profession, built on trust, defined by ethics, requiring character, competence, and commitment.
Then we saw the core leadership actions providing purpose, direction, motivation, and the essential attributes of presence and intellect.
Then the crucial shift to organizational leadership, where influence becomes indirect, And competencies like extending influence beyond the chain and creating a positive climate become paramount.
We saw those challenges vividly in the Aviano case. Study the pressure cooker of rapid growth, external demands, and internal friction testing every aspect of leadership.
And finally, the tools leaders can use: a structured vision process to guide change and motivate people intrinsically, and the case method to develop the critical thinking skills needed for complexity.
So the big takeaway really is that this journey into organizational and strategic leadership is demanding. It requires constant learning, adaptation, and self-development. It's a lifelong commitment.
You have to master the fundamentals, yes, but then you have to evolve how you apply them, moving from direct action to leading through systems, through influence, anticipating effects over longer timelines.
You have to become a steward of the organization, shaping its climate, empowering its people, building that trust from the top down, often under immense pressure.
It really underscores that solemn obligation of service we mentioned earlier. To meet that obligation, leaders have to continuously prepare themselves, which leads us to our final thought for you.
Think about some of the most revered strategic leaders, like Generals Eisenhower or Marshall before World War II. Neither had significant recent combat command experience compared to some peers, but they compensated through intense professional education, self-study, reflection. They developed a deep understanding of the future complexities of warfare and organization.
They prepared their intellect for the challenges ahead, even when those challenges weren't immediately apparent. That level of self-awareness, that commitment to continuous preparation for ambiguity, that's really what defines the highest levels of professional leadership. Something to keep thinking about.